welcome everyone to this very important virtual episode of Diversifying Data. I am your host, Rakhi Sharma, and this podcast is very important to me. It's in a month that's very important to everyone involved in this podcast right now. It is Pride Month in the UK and the US. So we've actually got a bit of a panel discussion today rather than just a one-on-one conversation, which I'm sure some of the listeners are more used to, the format in the studio. But we had so many amazing guests wanting to come on the show that we wanted to actually create more of a panel, open discussion between all of us really on here today. So to introduce our panel today, and I'm going to let them give their own full introductions. We have Maciej Dabrowny, we have Lior Locher, we have Joe Woodman, and we have Dana James Edwards. So all of you, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being on and for what I hope is going to be a really informative, exciting, and just knowledge and life-filled conversation. So thank you all for joining. So as mentioned, it is Pride Month, and just a brief context on Pride Month. I was doing a lot of research on it, and essentially I'm going to read out a very generic BBC description about it, and then we're going to dive into what it means individually to you, and we're just going to see if they match up. So Pride Month, according to the BBC, is about acceptance, equality, celebrating the work of LGBTQ people, the education of LGBTQ history, and raising awareness of the issues still facing the community. So that's really what the type of generic overview that Pride Month stands for, and that's kind of similar across a lot of different media publications. So what I want to do is first of all, start by going around the room and getting everyone to introduce themselves, and also maybe a little anecdote about what Pride Month personally means to each of you. So I am going to start actually with Lior. I'm going to pick out a random one from the crowd. So Lior, please give me everything about yourself and also what Pride Month means to you specifically.
Sounds good. Hello, everyone. My name is Lior Locher. I identify as non-binary and I'm bisexual. That's sort of my stance in, I guess, the alphabet soup of it all. I'm a learning consultant, coach, and author, and I'm also a working artist. So I'm one of those people with a portfolio career. That's kind of what I do for a day job, or day jobs, plural. Pride. I've got so many mixed feelings about Pride. I think the biggest headline for me is really siblinghood. That's kind of where I feel like I get to connect with sort of the queer family, essentially. So my chosen family. It's not always easy, like all families, it's not always, roses and cupcakes, but there is a bit of that as well. I'm very conscious of the political and societal implications of Pride. So I'm using the month and, like on my planet, obviously there's 12 Pride months, right? Let's be honest. But it's just one is louder than the others.
Yeah.
So I'm also using that shamelessly as an excuse to rattle the cage whenever I have the possibility, whether that's, within companies I work for or work with, or in my personal surroundings on LinkedIn and so on. I think that's the month, if you have a platform, to really make the most out of it and to advocate for all the good things. So it's a mix of a celebration, of emotional connection, and a bit of a riot, because we still have to, I think.
I love that. That's such a rebellious, but in the best way possible definition of it. I think that's amazing. I've never heard it described like that. So I'm like, yes, so far we've got something that's different and I love it.
You can you can light a fire in someone's heart, or you can light it, a bit further down. And I think we need to do both.
Brilliant. Well, we're going to get much more into that during the course of the conversation. So Max, can I ask you to go next and give an overview of yourself, what you do, and also what Pride Month means to you specifically?
Yeah, of course. So hello everybody, I'm Max. I guess I'm a consultant at Kubrick. I specialize in machine learning, and I'm currently in a placement at a bank, so I'm basically a finance bro at this point. And so I guess also in the alphabet soup, I am a gay man, so that's me. And to me, Pride, I think, because I've had a relatively easy life as a gay man, I don't think I've had anything too dire. To me, Pride is mostly a celebration. And I think touching on what Lior said about, it's like a conflict, I also have that because it's a celebration on one hand, but also it's like a fight. I'm Polish, so a lot of what I deal with or experience is to do with Poland. And obviously in Poland, it's trying to be a celebration, but there's still so much fighting that needs to be done to put people on equal footing that I think in that case, Pride is more like a fight to be like, hey, like, think of us kind of thing, rather than just like, look how great it is. Whereas like in England, for me, like when I think of Pride, for me, it's more like, yeah, let's like have a good time and like boogie along. And yeah, definitely more of a celebration than anything else. So it's kind of like those two opposing views that in some places, yeah, you have to have a little fight, but that's it. I can't really like define. It's one or the other for me. It's
No,
both
I get
in a
that.
way.
I get that. That's actually interesting to talk about the cultural dynamics of Pride as well. So thank you for that. That's really yeah, that's something to think about. We're going to dive into that as well. I'm trying to keep track of everyone's stories because they're so personal and really deep. So I want to definitely give it its space. But I want to move on to Joe Woodman now on the paddle board. So I'm trying to not lose track of that as well. Joe, do you want to give an overview of who you are for the viewers who don't know you, which I'm sure are very few, considering you've been on, I think, 2 or 3 of these podcasts before.
I think the last one I was on was last year's Pride one. So it's nice to be a returning guest
you are
to
that.
come and speak again.
Yeah.
So my name's Joe. I'm the commercial analytics manager at Kubrick. I've been with the company almost 4 years. And again, alphabet soup. I'm also a gay man. Help out with our internal diversity champions as a co-chair, and I'm in the middle of setting up our LGBTQ plus employee resource group here at Kubrick, which we're hoping to launch in the next couple of months. For me, for Pride, it's an interesting one. I'm much to the same point of Max, as I think compared to a lot of my friends and members of the queer community, I think I've had a pretty easier ride than some. And so actually I find Pride is a great time for me to get back into the experiences of people inside the LGBTQ plus communities who didn't have and don't have as easy in a ride as I do, and try and support and assist and educate and learn as much as possible. And it's a nice focal point in the year. I refuse to accept that it's the only point in the year. Yep. Very much like Lior mentioned, there are 12 months. But June's a great example, great space for us to sort of capitalize on the wave of communication and the wave of focus that comes around Pride and the LGBTQ plus communities.
Yeah.
And for me, it allows me to sort of push my knowledge and push my boundaries and learn new things and hear about new experiences and hear about people. But then also allows me to sort of push that education to wider people and have these kind of conversations, in the kitchen, in the office, or walking down the street with my old friends from school, or that kind of stuff. It's a nice sort of catalyst to sort of drive sort of queer communities and that kind of space.
Yeah. That's brilliant. And I know you and I have personally had a lot of discussions around it as well. So it's important. I love the general theme that we're talking about, that there are 12 months in a year and this is a space for it, but it's not the only space. And we're trying to create more space, a continual space that doesn't have to be referred to as a particular month for it. It's just all year round, and it's a celebratory and should be an accepted part of life. So on that note, Dana, I'm coming straight over to you. Last but very much not least, our force to be reckoned with, Dana James Edwards. Please give an overview of who you are, what you do, and also what Pride means to you.
So I am Dana. I am Kubrick's head of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I am also bisexual, discovered very late in life for reasons that we'll probably get into on this podcast. How do I feel about Pride? I think everyone's probably thinking the head of DEI's got to be super excited for Pride, right? It's a celebration. I have mixed feelings about Pride, if I'm honest. I do feel the celebration because I make myself remember that there are things to be celebrated. But if I'm being completely honest with everyone, and I had to think about, Dana, are you going to be really honest on this podcast? And I've decided, yes, I am. Pride makes me angry sometimes. There's the celebration, but then there is this simmering undercurrent of rage. I feel enraged because people who don't care about pride, don't talk about pride, who treat people badly, slap a rainbow on things, and that's supposed to make things feel all better. Sometimes I feel like the celebration element of it is really played up in a way that makes me feel uncomfortable, and that kind of overshadows things that are happening in the world, that are happening around us. And I think pride is important. It is really, really important. But I also think the focus of pride should be the people who aren't allowed to be proud. And there are so many people. I'm from Trinidad in the Caribbean. It is still illegal to be gay there, and I don't know, there's been a lot happening in the news and in the media, and I feel like in this month I want to feel the outrage alongside the celebration. I want to feel the protest with the rainbows, but I'm not always feeling it, and it makes me feel angry. That's how I feel about pride. And yes, I want to celebrate, and I'm glad that people can celebrate, the ones who can. But I also think that those outside of the community have to be reminded that there is more.
Yeah.
There is more to this than rainbows.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, like I said, I was writing down a whole list of questions, and quite frankly, what you've just said, thrown all of that out the window. I want to take it, but I honestly, I don't want to ask any of the questions that I've written down. I want to really dive into, because I think that was that was just, all of you have given such a real take. It's not sugar butterflies, let's be and call ourselves an ally, slap a rainbow on our face, put some glitter on, and walk down the streets and say we support. It's about the issues really still prevalent to people who cannot have the luxury of celebrating pride. So really getting into, I think what connects to me the most whenever I listen to podcasts, whenever I listen to anything, is people's personal journeys. And I don't want to put anything on any of you to be forthright about your journey, but I think making a generic stance on a particular topic, maybe some people will connect to that, but for me, what always connects is the personal journey, the anecdotes. How did you come to this realization? How did you get that enraged? What are you personally connected to in this month and in this community? So I'm happy to just open up the floor, and Dana, if you wanted to continue, or Leo or Max, anyone, if you wanted to sort of give the listeners and people listening who maybe don't feel like they have as much of a voice, or can't really, maybe it's a nice outlet for them to be able to connect to one of your personal stories. So I'm happy to shut up and just let someone kick off and start talking about their personal journeys and what they wish Pride stood for, and what we can do to move everything forward in the right way.
I don't mind going first.
Go for it.
With it. I got it.
Go for it.
I think sort of leaning on from what Dana was saying there, and I think that it's a really important line to take. I think it's very easy for us, especially people who, for instance, are aligned with their gender at birth, and for people who find it easier to sort of, I say hide, but there isn't outward evidence of them being part of the community. It's very easy to think about Pride as a celebration, and not as a sort of I said a conflict. Do you know what I mean? Like, and not driving for us to be better. Like in the West, especially in my lifetime, but in the last couple of decades, we've pushed and we've sort of felt the effects of generations of people in the LGBTQ communities fighting for rights and fighting for success, and I think we can quite easily take for granted the steps that we've made and think that we're at the end, and actually we are many steps away from that end goal, and we need to be using our voices and using our space to identify those people who are not only are in countries that don't that aren't pro LGBT plus, and where being a member of this community is sometimes a death sentence, but also being parts of communities inside these countries that do have acceptable rights, and being able to sit there and go that, oh, actually I'm a big sports fan and I don't feel comfortable being able to talk about my sexuality or anything, or I'm part of a religious community, or I'm part of a different community that doesn't accept me for who I am. The government might do, and the laws might do, but nobody else does. Do you know what I mean? And actually, it's really useful to have this kind of focus and this kind of point to drive that, we can have legal change, and we're there and we're getting there and all of that kind of stuff. But there's still places to go for that one. But it's actually the cultural change. And I think I kind of agree with Dana, actually. It's from a pride perspective, slapping rainbows on logos and dancing down the street and all that kind of stuff is great, and it has a step on that in that journey, but it's not the solution, and it feels like a victory parade, and it shouldn't be. It should be us, driving the fact that our communities exist, and that we shouldn't be quiet and we shouldn't be held down and we shouldn't be sort of controlled, but actually trying to give a voice to those people who want to be dancing down the street and want to be, parts of communities that can slap rainbows onto things and be able to sort of, express themselves as they are, but aren't. And I think that's the really important thing to me. Like, I come from a very lucky background. I come from quite an affluent background in sort of the middle of the UK. I was relatively comfortable coming out. One of my family members is gay, and so that conversation had already happened. If you see what I'm saying, in my family. But I know plenty of people who don't have that access and have come out, and their family and their communities have been frosty, have been ostracizing, have been sort of pushing them away from that space. And it's very easy to think that we've won and we can marry and we can do all of that kind of stuff. But actually, there are so many more steps, and I think it's really important that we have that kind of conversation.
Absolutely. I was just, when you were talking, it sounded to me, I don't know if that's akin to what you were saying, but in terms of the Pride parade and marching down like it's a victory parade, would you almost prefer it to be more in line with a protest rather than a victory parade?
I mean, we've got to remember where we started, right? It was a protest. That's the whole thing, right? Yeah. That's why we're here, is that people saw that society wasn't accepting of who they are, and they got up and they made a big racket about it until, well, I said it was, until it's getting closer, if you see what I'm saying. So remembering that is really important.
Yes.
But realizing that we're not just protesting against sort of structural society, laws and politicians and all of that kind of stuff who might be holding us back, but we're also protesting against cultures, which is a very different and difficult thing to sort of understand. And it's also very difficult to target. You know what I mean? It's quite easy to go and stand outside Number 10 or go and stand, walk down Whitehall, but it's very difficult to have that kind of thought process. And that's why being so vocal and being so in the media and being so in the space is important, because it starts driving that change in, families' living rooms and in community centres and in religious centres and all of that kind of stuff. Those kind of things can have that space. And I think that's where I think Pride should be going. It's not a victory, but we're just protesting against the cultural restrictions as well as the legal restrictions. If that makes sense. I feel like I'm...
Yeah, no, it does a lot. And actually, both Max and Dana, you both touched on cultural elements, country elements of that. So do you want to speak to both of maybe your experiences? And Dana, you mentioned you discovered your sexuality later on in life. I am not putting you on the spot at all, but in case that resonates with certain listeners who are hoping to connect to a human story, I am giving you the floor to kind of talk to those cultural aspects as well.
Okay, so I think the first thing you need to know about me is that I grew up very, very religious. I was an altar server in church and a Sunday school teacher, and my uncle at one point was the Bishop of Trinidad and Tobago, and there was a lot going on religious-wise in my family. There was no space to be anything other than straight. I mean, it just was not an option. And actually, I don't think I even really understood. So I went to a Catholic all-girls school, and I'd be looking around and thinking, man, these are some of the most beautiful women I've ever seen in my life, right? But I thought that everyone thought that. So, like, everyone's interested in boys, looking at the boys. Yeah, I'll look at the boys. Some of them are cute. But also, I thought everyone thought that their girlfriends were hot too, some of them, but that you just didn't act on it because that is not a thing that you do, right? So I just went through life assuming that that is how it was for every single person, right? I didn't realize that no, some people are really only attracted to certain groups. Like it just was so far from the realm of possibility
Right.
that I didn't even think about it. One of my best friends in the world was gay, and he discovered that about himself really, really early. And when we were in secondary school, he invited a boy who he had a crush on home for a study date.
Mhm.
And as part of that study date, they had their first kiss. Unfortunately, his dad walked in. He couldn't go to school for a week. He was beaten that badly. And I think the message is, do what you're supposed to. Okay, like there is no space to be other. There was no space to be different. And I think when I was in Trinidad, I did have some kisses with the ladies. And every time I would go to church every day for like weeks after because of the guilt and the shame and everything that was kind of wrapped up in that. And I think I went to an industry event. This was after I had moved to the UK. And I went to an event for Pride. I mostly went because there were free drinks, if I'm being honest with you. But then I got there and the people of the rainbow were telling their stories, and this woman was talking about being bisexual and being attracted to people and to the different genders and the who of who people were. And for the first time in my life, I was like, oh, that is me.
Yeah.
That's me. That's how I feel. Like, it doesn't matter to me if it's a man or woman. There's just something about people that attracts me. And there was someone else like me. I was discovering myself. I was learning myself. And so today I kind of feel like, well, Dana, you did all of this and you came to terms with yourself, and now you are incredibly straight passing. You married a man, you gave your family that big white wedding that they always wanted, and now you have 2 kids, and nobody who's on the outside looking in can tell the who of who you are. You have to tell them, right? Because from the outside you look very much like a hetero woman with the husband and the kids and all of that. And some of it is very masking. And it is incredibly comfortable to just slide on by under the radar and to let people assume. It's incredibly comfortable. And you could go through your whole life like that. And I guess I could have gone through my whole life like that after I was married, but then something changed. So the friend I was just telling you about, who was beaten by his dad for kissing a boy very, very badly. Or we moved to the UK within months of each other. So he came first and then I came right after. And some years ago, he died by suicide.
So sorry.
He died because, well, I think anyway, because he was unable to be his true self. So we made up a term called London gay. London gay meant he was only gay in London. When we went home to Trinidad, I would be there going over to his parents and we'd be talking about his non-existent girlfriend in London and, keeping up the charade. And then he met someone amazing. They moved in together. They had a life. But every time his family was coming over from Trinidad, he had to pretend like that wasn't a thing that was happening, even though they were very much in love. And then obviously his partner couldn't continue to live like that for an extended period, wanted to be free and open about who he was. And so they broke up. And I think he just felt that there wasn't a life anymore for him, that he would never really be able to be gay because he was the first son of a first son and a Muslim, and there was a lot going on there, and he just couldn't do it anymore. So I got a wonderful phone call from him the day before, just saying hi, just checking in. And the next thing you know, the hospital is ringing me because I'm his next of kin. And I think I decided that I needed to be louder.
Yeah.
And I needed to show up more. And as straight passing as I am, that I needed to add my voice to my community for all the people. Rakhi, I'm sorry.
Oh my God,
I'm so
Dana,
sorry.
this is choking me up as so I don't know if I'm going to be able
I'm
to
so
continue.
sorry.
Don't take your time. This is such an emotional moment for you. Take your time. Thank you, Dana, for sharing that, because that was really powerful, and I think that just shows a lot of heart and the heart that the community has. So, Lior, I don't know if you wanted to go next. That would be really helpful.
I can, and I have to say I'm a little bit choked up as well. And I think this is really, this points to how big that conversation needs to be and how small it often is in reality, because people live whole lives and people don't realize how difficult that can be. And even though, the rest of your life might be like everyone else's, the fact that it isn't, in many ways it's not, makes the rest of the life also more complicated, more difficult, more volatile in a way people just have no idea about.
Yeah.
So I guess from my own story, I kind of always knew I wasn't a girl, even though that was what I was supposed to be. There was also a slightly convoluted situation in that my dad was meant to be the heir of a family farm, and I'm the first child that was born.
Right.
And at that time, he wasn't going to get the farm because there was like family drama and stuff. So he was basically raising me when I was very small while he was a student and my mom was working full time. So he was kind of retraining later in life to do something that wasn't farming. So I think I was raised by a man to be a male heir to a family farm that no longer existed. So I think he just raised me as a miniature version of himself.
Yeah.
And then at some point he finished studying and my mom stayed home because by that time my little brother was born and my dad was then the full-time breadwinner.
Yeah.
And I just got so confused. It all made no sense to me. I felt like, I had found a place that was my place and none of the definitions that were on offer made any sense. I had the first sort of gender conversation about that in a Catholic kindergarten in rural southern Germany. You can imagine how well that went. Not very. And then I was just kind of more or less trying to pass. I guess I was always a bit of a tomboy, but it was also the countryside, so I was outside. I once had a part-time job over summer working on a construction site, which I really loved. Like I just got along really well with that. That made a lot of sense for me. I also worked in a jewelry shop at some point. So, there's definitely range. I think for me, I discovered also again fairly late in life. I think I just tried to ignore it, hoping it would sort itself out and I didn't have to deal with it. And then I had an existential crisis when I went to the theater in New York, not because of the theater,
Wow.
but because of their user satisfaction survey, because the gender options had like a menu of 10 different items,
Oh, I see.
most of which I had no idea what they were.
Oh,
So I spent a very confusing night Googling what all of that was and kind of, mentally and emotionally trying them on for size. And non-binary just immediately made sense. It's really just, I think it is a place that's not one of the other two places, and it's a place in its own right. So
yeah.
I don't identify as trans because for me, trans means you start somewhere or you were put somewhere, but you actually wanted to be somewhere else or need to be somewhere else. And for me, I felt like I started in my place and I'm still in that place. I've got like fancier terminology as I got older, but that's kind of that's where it is. And it's been really difficult because a lot of people don't take it seriously. They think, like the amount of times I get asked, have you decided yet? Or I'm like, decided what?
Wow, that's really a question. My
I haven't
God.
decided in like 40 years since I had that first conversation. So I think it's unlikely I'm that bad at decision making, really.
Oh my goodness.
But also like work-wise, so I had one, and that's, I guess, my link to the whole life point. Like I'm a professional, I have a career and so on, and most of what I do and how I show up has nothing to do with, how I identify and so on. Like, by the way, it is for most people. Like, it's not, people make it a big thing, but it's really not. It's just when it goes wrong, it's a really big thing. And I think that's where also organizations and people and so on don't really think that through. So I had one situation where I got bullied out of a job, which essentially sort of destroyed, at least at that point in time, destroyed my career, and I needed to rebuild everything. It was financially also a medium-sized disaster then, obviously, as a result. And that took a long time to rebuild. And that's, people don't realize the effect that has. So, like you probably wouldn't be able to pinpoint on my LinkedIn profile when and where that happened. And that's very intentional because, nobody needs to know that.
Yeah.
But, this means people expect I have a certain life and I don't, just to like, I'll just be super honest. Like at one point I was curious how big the financial damage was, and I tried to tally it up in terms of loss of lifetime earnings, which is really difficult, but I tried to, just get a ballpark estimate with pension savings, interest rates, and, all sorts of things. It's probably about £250,000. That's a house. That's a house I will never own. That's money I will never get back.
Yeah.
And the person who was the main bully, the week when I was so desperate that I had night jobs working as a waitress at events and so on, the week I was stealing bread out of a bin bag, she bought a second house in Italy.
That angers me.
And you have to, I have to live with that. I wake up every morning, I look around me, I look at what the materiality of my life is like. And, yes, I was able to rebuild my career. Yes, I'm able to, sit on panels, go to conferences and do fancy things. And I obviously still got all my professional credentials, none of that has gone away. But my life is very different in ways that are, that I'm not going to be able to get back ever.
Yeah. And I mean, that's something that, of course, the scars of that wound stay with you for a very long time. And I think that's really also what people don't recognize, is that through every insult, through every slur, through every time someone gets taken down in that way. I mean, in your way, it was astronomical at the time for you. You've obviously rebuilt and are very well respected within your field as well. But it took time to get to that point. But the scars of that wound clearly have still, stayed after the fact. But I do want to come back to some of the talks and the conferences and how vocal you are in this community as well, and how you've actually taken an experience that could have really damaged you and wanted to push you back into the shadows. And actually it's made you come out even more, even louder, even stronger. And I think maybe some words of encouragement to people who are going through something, maybe not on the same scale, but who could use some words of encouragement to not slink back into the shadows and just actually use that as a power to take that forward.
Yeah, and I think for me, I was debating, the first time I came out at work, I did it sort of, quietly, one colleague conversation at a
Mm,
time and so on, because that felt like the safer option.
right.
And and then obviously when it went off the rails in that one organization with that group of people, I had no allies, nobody knew what to do, nobody knew who I was, and so on. So I did go back into the closet for another couple of years as I was sort of getting my life back sorted out. And then I decided, okay, maybe the second time it needs to be so loud that nobody, that it will be stupidly expensive for organizations to
Yep.
do something bad about it.
Love
So
it.
the second coming out was by running 2 sessions at 2 global conferences,
Hmm.
which is a really stressful way of doing it, because not only are you running sessions at a global conference, which would be enough adrenaline for most people, you're also coming out while you're doing that. Um, it worked though, so the resonance was really good. Lots of surprised people, but positively surprised, and it started lots of conversations, and I do feel it made my situation safer.
Right. Right.
I think it's a bit of a trade-off, because essentially I had a long chat with it was more of a rant really with a friend of mine yesterday. Because essentially it's like you're trading scar tissue for safety. And I'm aware I'm saying that on a podcast that's being
Mhm.
recorded and will be broadcast, so I'm literally doing it right now.
Hmm.
But that's what a lot of that storytelling is. And I'm obviously comfortable doing it, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here. But I think that's also a point for organizations who go into the storytelling space, that
Mm,
that's what they're asking people to do. And I think most of us probably know intuitively that that's what we're doing, and that we're going to get into territory that's emotional and deep. But I think half the people who are putting these podcasts, panels, and all the things that are happening this month together have no idea. Basically, they don't have the boots for the hike, but they're going anyways. So I think it's also about care for the people who are doing that, and also
yeah.
the respect for the enormous amount of work that takes
Yeah.
as we're
Absolutely.
doing that.
So,
Absolutely.
full disclosure, Lior and I are friends. And I just want to say that in addition to you coming out in the conferences, she also tweeted, like it was one of the boldest tweets I've seen in a long time.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
when we first met, she went by Christine. And one day I woke up and on Twitter, there was a tweet saying, "My name is now Lior. My pronouns are now she, they, and I'm non-binary." And just like there was no, it was just
Wow.
out there, like, whoa. And I was like surprised, but also like, damn,
Yeah.
look at just
Yeah.
like the bravery of it. I was blown away by that.
That's amazing. I think bold is definitely a word that we can use for you, Leo. Like that's just bold, out there, just like ready to take. Like you literally are like a lion. You're just ready to take on anything. I just see that in you, and that's amazing. How long? Because I actually didn't know that you two were friends, so this is great. How long have you guys been friends for? Keeping this side of the room completely like, oh, nice to meet you, Leo. You guys have known each other for a while, right?
Well,
Yeah, a
the
couple
L&D
couple of years, I guess.
community, it's been some years, Leo.
Yeah,
It's been a while, yeah.
yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. Wow. Well, we're going to come back to actually, I think what I'd like to dive into a lot because you've talked, Leo, about the power, both negative and positive, that organizations have on a person
Rakhi, can I
within the
just stop you
community.
1 second?
Of
Max
course.
didn't get to tell his story.
Of course. So after we go, nope, 100%. That's what I want to dive back into in the organizational side of things. But I am going to flip it to Max first of all. And like I said, we've got this is a personal journey. So you do not, we've had very, very like a wide range of stories. So this is not like you're the last one. Let's put all the pressure on you. We just want to hear your experience. So just go for it and tell us your experience.
Well, no, hopefully, I mean, my experience is not anything too traumatic. So hopefully it will be nice and light, which I can say from a place of huge privilege. I think just to touch on what Lior and Dana said about how difficult it is to like kind of keep yourself contained. I don't think people that are outside the community realize just like how emotionally taxing it is to keep that part of you hidden, because or not even a part of it, it's to keep you hidden, because it's not just like, oh, I guess I just won't mention that I'm going on a date with a boy instead of a girl or something. Like there's so much more that goes into it that like keeping it hidden is just so taxing, and people don't realize this. And I feel like that's just so important to know, because if you keep it hidden, horrible things can happen. You can do horrible things. And I think that's like, bold is definitely the way to put it. Like I think if you're not bold, people aren't going to be bold for you. And it's like you're putting yourself out there, you're making yourself vulnerable. But if you don't do it, who will? And I think recently, like as I said, I'm a finance bro. I work in a bank, and everybody there is like all serious. They've got their suits. They're like business, business, business. So when I joined in like October, I was like, oh well, I don't want to like come out. I don't know like what's gonna happen. And my coworkers were all like sound. I like them all, but I was still like I don't know. Like I came out at 18, and since then I've been loud about it. As I don't care what you think. But when I was put in this like big boy position, I was like, oh, I don't know what to do. And like a couple of months ago, I was like, you know what, I just can't be bothered. Like, what's the point? Like, if they hate me, they hate me. Like, what matters? And I can say that because, it's I'm in a place of safety. If I say that I'm not going to get attacked at the bank or anything, like everything will be fine. And so I think also touching back to the point of like what does pride mean to you? Like it's you got to bear that in mind. Whereas I can happily be like, yeah, I'm gay. So what if you don't like it? Don't like it. But obviously you can't do that everywhere. It's very 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 personal. And so I think that kind of touches back
Yeah.
on the like what does pride mean to you, and we have to bear that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Max, did you feel like you were able to be loud even in Poland when you were growing up there?
So I moved out of Poland when I was 9, and I didn't realize I was gay till much later.
Okay.
So I guess in summary, like yeah, I moved to England, and then I didn't realize for like absolute ages. It was till I was like 14 or like 15, and suddenly I was just like, oh wait, what? Like, hold on, this doesn't make sense. And then, well, like when I did realize, I was still like, because I was obviously brought up in Poland, and like both my parents were Christian, so it was like very much like deep down. So even after I realized, I was like, oh no, I'm still gonna get married to a woman, and it'll be fine, like whatever. And then it wasn't until like much later I was like, oh yeah, like okay, never mind. Like, I do not like women at all. Sorry, bye. Um, and it was and I think kind of like keeping it down for so long till I was 18, which also isn't, I guess, that long of a time. But I'm only 24, so to me it's a long time. Keeping it down has kind of meant that I don't really care for like the way people would label me. So I say like I'm a gay man. I say that about myself. I say I'm a man, but deep down I don't really care for it. I use he him pronouns, but I don't care for them. I think I'm very much like I'm gonna wear what I want whenever I want. I'm gonna say like I think it's kind of funny because at one point. So I have a brother who's like 11, and when he was a bit younger, my dad was saying some stuff to him that was like a little homophobic and whatever. And so I would just start being like, "Oh, but Dad, I'm a girl, right?" And he'd be like, "What?" And I'd be like, "I'm a girl." Like, it's just I am, and like that would like throw him off. And I think because of that, because I'm very argumentative, and I would use that as like a tool to be like, if you say horrible things about like trans people or non-binary people, I could be one of those. Like, you don't know that. And so because of that, I think I don't really care about labels that much.
I love the bold nature of everyone coming on this call and just being free to be who they are, but having a lot of respect and acknowledgement of the people who cannot be as bold as that. So I think that's a good sort of segue actually just to talk about of course, this is a work-driven podcast because we're you know three of well 1, 2, 3, 4 of us work at Kubrick. So I wanted to just actually dive into more of the organizational aspects. I mean, for example, for this month, Dana, Joe, you know this as well as anyone. We're running an internal allyship workshop. We're marching. Are we allowed to say that, Dana?
You're totally allowed to say that.
Drum roll. We are actually marching in Pride this year, which is the 1st of July. We have a series of internal webinars relating to Pride. We're doing our best to be as loud as we can, but of course there is so much room for improvement, movement, and suggestion, open forums. So I wanted to know, maybe starting actually with Lior, because you are speaking on panels, you are very vocal about how organizational changes can really affect employees in both a positive and negative space. What do you think organizations can do to become more supportive, nurturing, accepting, loud, vocal? I know that's a big range of words, but anything that you could kind of share in terms of experience would be great.
I think it really starts with listening, and I think that's true for all topics in the inclusion space, really. Don't think about a topic for the people, think about that with them and think it through with them and listen to what they're telling you, because they probably know where the hitches are. Think it through from a whole life perspective, so not just, kind of the more obvious, who will the person invite to the company Christmas party as their second person, and how do you phrase that? That's important, but think through the whole life picture. Realize that people will possibly be a lot more vulnerable, and their situation might be a lot more precarious, which, by the way, is also true for anything around social mobility and so on. So it's probably good to think that through anyways as an organization. People might literally not have enough credit card limit to book a business trip. Think through those things. And then really use your weight. As an organization, I think you need to earn the right to be in that space. So if you're doing something externally facing, don't just do it because it's Pride Month and everyone else is doing it and you have a graphic designer who has a spare half an hour to slap rainbows on everything. Don't do that. Silence is an option if you have nothing to say. And so earn the right to do stuff, but also use your weight in the market and in the industry. So if you have a pension provider and you don't like what they're offering and how they're handling name changes, talk to them. Say, hey, we've got 500, 5,000, 50,000 people. Do something for us.
Yeah.
And I think companies forget that. Procurement policy. Who are you buying goods and services from? Are you, which state in the US are you running your major client conference in? Because that will make a difference to some people these days. Not to get too political, but I think we all kind of know whether, let's, and I think companies, and that's where it matters, people understand money and decisions a lot quicker than they understand social changes, and that's a good way to just put a few pins in you can then tie stuff to. And I think organizations don't use that enough. And yes, a procurement policy is maybe not the sexiest thing, but that's the bit that's going to move things.
Even when we're talking to clients that we're working with from a team perspective and having those open conversations, because we have consultants who are like Max on the ground at our clients. So having a discussion around what their internal policies are and having those bigger, wider conversations probably will move the needle more. Actually, that's brilliant. That's really, really useful.
Also, not to make assumptions. So,
yes.
I've had global roles and, worked on global projects for most of the past 15 years or so. I have at some point looked after learning and development in Saudi Arabia for one organization. And, they knew I were out, not so much the people in Saudi Arabia. We didn't make it a big thing, but I was out, 10 seconds of Google would have clarified whatever questions people would have had. And I was okay with that, but that needs a conversation. So don't assume the person's not going to do it, but also don't assume it wouldn't need to be a conversation. And I think HR and parts of the organization need to do the full legwork with the terms and conditions, with things like, would I have insurance coverage if if anything goes seriously wrong, who's going to make the phone call and who's going to get me back out? That, you need to have proper adult conversations. And organizations need to be prepared to have them.
I think that you're doing such a great amount of work to be so vocal about the ways in which you can do it. And I'm hoping that organizations do take those tangible pieces of advice. It's not airy-fairy. These are tangible things that people can action. So I'm hoping, Dana, from a Kubrick perspective, you could maybe discuss some of the things that we're doing as a company to at least move towards that.
So I guess my starting point is that Kubrick is by no means the finished article. So when I walk into an organization, any organization, I look around me and I think, well, how comfortable would I be to be open here? And I think when I first arrived, I was unsure. And for me, that is a problem. But it is something that we can work on, but we need to work on it in more than June. And I think we've been very good and intentional about that. We are creating LGBTQ Kubrick plus for our LGBTQ plus employees. I think it's really important to have that protected space, but also to resource a network group. I would love us to keep our pride flags up all year round, even when we move to the new office, because it is such a very visual signal of who is welcome here. I'm also enjoying seeing the pride lanyards on people, just because it is a message. It's subtle, but there is a message there. And when someone is new in an organization and they're looking for clues, something as small as a pin or a lanyard could be that clue. I also think it's important for me, the way that we talk about this month and the work that we do externally. I feel like across the month, there are lots of organizations who are like, hey, look at us, we're amazing. And less, hey, here's where we are, and this is some stuff that we need to do. So making sure that we get that balance right. I also think, yes, of course, education is important, and we've put a great lens on that during the month. But when we say supporting the LGBT community, show me the money, actual support. So we're doing some of that as well. We had a charity bake sale, but there's also a project underway to see how we can use our data and technology skills to help LGBTQ plus organizations, which I feel is really important, because if we're saying we support, we really should be supporting all the way.
Absolutely.
We have not rainbow-fied our logo for social media. I think we're not at that point yet. Lior started to say that you have to earn your right to be in this space. I don't 100% feel like we have earned it yet, but I do feel like we are well on the way, and that change is coming and that it's important. For me, a big concern is that we have a consultant hire, train, deploy model. And while I do feel great that people would be safe and protected at home at Kubrick, I worry a lot about what happens to consultants when we send them out into the world and how we're supporting them outside of Kubrick. That will always really be important to me. And do they know that they can come home if things aren't right, and that there are things we can do here at home to support them? I'm not sure that that message is 100% getting across, and we need to make that more vocal and more vibrant. But also, this is one thread. Like we've been saying throughout, there are 12 months of the year. I have already, Joe will tell you this, I started off Diversity Champions by saying, sure, let's talk about Pride Month, but at the end of this planning meeting, I also want 3 other activities that are going to take place at other points during the year that is not June. So I set them a very big challenge from the very start of the planning to say, hey, this is not just a month. We're not just talking about June. We're talking about the rest of the year. Finally, I think it's important to really note that Kubrick has offices in the US, and things in the US are a bit different from the way that things are in the UK. And our staff who are there have to know that we support them, have to know where we stand. And if we are saying that we support LGBTQ plus people and LGBTQ plus rights, is that message being heard by the market? Is it being heard by your team? How are we getting those points across? Do people know that they are cared for, safe, and protected? Do they know that? Until they do, we've got work to do. And not just June work, year-round work.
Year-round work. Well, I actually wanted to maybe ask Max from his opinion then, being a consultant on client side, not to put you on the spot completely, but just to ask you, you're obviously like it's so inspiring listening to you and the kind of gumption that you take of I am who I am, this is what it is. I've been very successful to get into a bank and a financial institution, utilizing my skills and what I'm good at. Do you feel that, and you can be very honest because Jane is going to use this as obviously ways in which we can improve, but have you had any of that clear cut communication on how we do support, or has that come sort of later on? What's your experience been?
I think there has been like a change actually. I can see like as you say, more people wearing lanyards, more decorations, and I don't think it's just because of Pride. I think it's like happening earlier. But I think I think at the beginning I wouldn't, as Dana said, I wouldn't be sure whether I can be like, hey guys, I am what I am. But now definitely much more so, and especially with like I think Dana being very vocal about all the events we got going on, it's definitely been like, well, if you don't see it now, I feel like that's your own fault. But now I think it definitely is getting much more open. And I think especially with like Kubrick being able to go on the Pride March, I think that's we were talking about the little things, but also the big things do count as well. Being able to go to a Pride March is a huge success. And so I think that exemplifies that, yes, we are happy to, to support LGBTQ plus.
Yeah. Brilliant. And I guess, Joe, I wanted to ask you, you've been here for, like you said, almost 4 years, and you're a very vocal part of Diversity Champions. You're a very close friend of mine, and I know that you've got your own personal journey, but you're really, you've always been really keen on pushing the needle and trying to help as much as possible. I really wanted to ask you from your perspective, what do you think are the key takeaways and what more can be done from your perspective? I'm just curious, having been here for 4 years, how you feel about that.
Yes, good question. Just to answer Max's question as well, the before was about, I'm going to say 4 months ago, which was when Dana joined us. So any time before that was the before.
Pre-Dana, post-Dana.
Pre-Dana, post-Dana are the timelines. At least that's how I work from it. No, I mean, I've been, as I said, Kubrick for 4 years and have seen the business go from a sort of tiny little business that was, Max, from your thing, only in that office in 96, all the way to the 1,000+ business that we are now, and have seen the growth pains which any business experiences. And one of those, I think, is not having that direct drive for action. We've all got a million and one things. I complain about my job, well, not my job, but the amount of work I do in my job constantly, as Dana and Rakhi, you both know. And so, but just it's a very exciting time, and there's lots and lots of things to do, and it's very easy for us to lose sort of DEI and LGBTQ plus communities from the agenda. And it sort of comes back to what I said earlier. It's like, it's easy to think that we've won, and it's very easy to think that the law says that it's all good, which means it's all good, and forget that actually there's so much more. It was quite an interesting one. Max, you were talking about your sort of journey and your timeline. And I think I've known, of the time I've known I'm gay, I'm 27 now, 28, lost track. But however old I am, in the time I've known I'm gay, I've been in the closet longer than not. Do you know what I mean? Like, I sort of came out when I was about 21, 22 time. And it's quite easy to forget that actually, even coming from a very supportive background and a supportive family and all of that kind of stuff, I still didn't feel confident enough to be able to do that. I remember when I came out of work, that was fun. No, it was that value. It was fun. It was quite interesting. I had never had to do that before. I had never have gone through that journey. And Kubrick was incredibly supportive. And it was, but it very much, Lior, to your point, it was have a conversation with one employee, then have a conversation with another employee. And it wasn't the bold statement. It was I'm going to just dip my toe in here and dip my toe in there. And it's quite easy. It's, again, quite easy to think that, because we're not overtly anti sort of LGBTQ plus, therefore we're fine. And that's not what needs to be the case. We need to be building that place where, much to Dana, to your point, like there is the little signs that go, oh, actually, this is a place I can be myself in. I know I've been chasing you to get a Pride lanyard from, I think, since day one when you joined, and you gave me one a couple of weeks ago, which is very exciting. And we do, we do bits. We had the Pride flags up in the 96 office for the whole year post Pride Month last year, but it's great. It'd be great to have that further, and it'd be great to have those little things across the business that can sort of facilitate that culture. And to, there are little things and there are the big things, and it's important to do both. And it's important to be having somebody like Dana and having somebody like our IHR team and the DEI team driving that directly, because it's very easy for us to go, oh, well, I need to do this, and therefore I don't have time to do the things I really want to do. And having that direct support, put the money where the mouth is kind of thing, for projects, etc. But also putting the money where the mouth is to have dedicated people inside the business whose only job is to make us better, and then drive us to be a better business and drive us to be more inclusive and drive us to be more diverse is really, really valuable and really important.
Yeah.
And so linking back, the before was before Dana joined.
Yeah.
Now is after. And I'm really excited to see where that goes. Yeah, BD and AD.
Well, no, that was great. Sorry, Max, you were going to jump in.
Sorry, yeah, I was really quickly just wanted to add, and I think us in the I really like the alphabet soup. I don't know why, but like us in the alphabet mafia as well. I think because of how sensitive everything is, I think we're very good at picking up on subtle clues or like subtle signs. So I think once you get to a point where like if you go to a new place, you will be looking out for a lot of these things, and like if there are, like, they will be noticed, as everybody was saying, like there's a little pin or something, like we will notice. It's not just going to be like, oh, we don't know, like, or just the way people talk. Like I think it's very easy for us to notice when a place is friendly.
Yeah. I think that's actually a professional superpower in a way, because a lot of the work I do is around organizational change and so on. And I think I'm almost hyper vigilant about these things. I think my radar is a lot better developed than maybe that of some other people who don't feel like they need to scan their environments for clues and dynamics and things like that. So it actually helps my work. It genuinely does. And I think a lot of people who are, either member of the alphabet mafia, that's even better, by the way.
That's so funny.
Or who are, minority groups in any other way, are probably really, really good at doing that. And that's super useful. So I think organizations really need to use that as the superpower it actually is. And if someone has a better attuned radar, like if someone can hear frequencies you can't hear and they tell you there's like a noise happening, you probably want to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that we're sort of coming towards the end, and I've massively overran because I've been given an hour's session, and it's already like 20 minutes past. So I actually have a pretty direct question for Lior as well. Maybe this is slightly a bit of a left field question, but I'm really interested because you're so public, you're so out there. How do you feel? Do you feel that people use you as sort of a single source of knowledge? Do you get an influx of questions from businesses, from people? Do you welcome that? Do you find it like, I do other things? I'm not just here to answer everyone's questions on it. Actually, genuinely, what do you feel about being so out there and vocal and needing to answer or having to answer that?
I think it depends who's asking and with what intention. And, well, there is a volume question as well at some point. But generally, if somebody... no matter how clumsy the question is, I've had conversations where the initial question was because the person was completely running out of words for things. So, it didn't even hold up from a grammatical point of view anymore. But it was just so heartfelt and the person really wanted to know. And then, of course, I'm helping. Generally, I mean, Google does exist, so people can apply that liberally, or, any other search engines, obviously. But, I'm happy to share what I can. I think role models help, and I wish there were more non-binary people out in business. So sometimes I do feel like I'm literally the only one in the village, and sometimes I actually am. So, so I think, it does help to see and hear from more people, and I do need to remind people that I have a day job that's not actually like doing inclusion, but I have a day job that's something completely different. It does, obviously I work in learning and development and so on, so there is a component to that, but that's not my main gig.
Yeah.
So occasionally I do need to remind people of that as well.
Lior,
And
you have a day job and a gay job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. I very much do.
I
And
love it.
sometimes you need to remind people that, if I'm running a project, I'm running a project. I'm not running a non-binary project, or
Yeah.
whatever goes on in people's heads. Like, it's not, it is a big deal, but it's also not. I still have like 4 degrees and all the other things, which is probably on a day-to-day what matters a whole lot more.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, that was genuinely just I was just genuinely really curious, because I looked at your LinkedIn. Obviously, I was doing my research. I was like, God, she must get inundated with just tons of questions from people. So that's actually really useful. I wanted just to end with maybe asking you what you would hope a listener would take away from this podcast, either from something that you've said, from something someone else has said, or from the general direction of the conversation, what you hope listeners can take or resonate with, or anything of the above.
I think I would say that you have to. I kind of links back to asking one person instead of going on Google or something. Is that you have to ask multiple people, because as we found out during this podcast, I mean, if you speak to me, my experience is hugely different than Dana's or Lior's. So I think the takeaway is that you obviously ask people and be curious about whatever it is you want to be, but bear in mind that the person you're asking might not be the best person to ask, and you should definitely try to diversify your whoever you're asking, or your research, or your Google search, whatever it is.
Building on that from my end, meet people on their terms, not on yours. So it's not about what you think good grammar looks like, or what a valid pronoun is, or what you think life should look like, or an arrangement between consenting adults, or whatever. It's really what's valid for that person, and be curious and see what life looks like from where they're standing. You might learn something.
Yeah, I love that. Joe, Dana.
Okay. Thank you, Dana. I think the thing from all of the conversations from and views from I think this group, I think the takeaway I would push is that when we're talking about pride and we're talking about the LGBTQ plus community, it's not the final step, and we've done one lap of a very long race, and so making sure that we are celebrating the lap that we have done, but also focusing on the laps to come, I think is very important, and driving that space, and remembering that it's very easy for some members of the LGBTQ communities to think that we are done and finished, but other members of the communities have only just started their journeys and only just started their fights. And actually, those of us who maybe are slightly further ahead in those conversations, legally, culturally, our job now is to make sure we're supporting our colleagues and our friends and communities that aren't anywhere near as far in their own journeys and their own races.
Love that.
For people who are listening, I would say, if you were listening to this podcast and suddenly some pieces of something fell into place for you for the first time, I guess my message is that it's never too late to discover who you are and to find out more about it, and that you're welcome to reach out to any of us on the podcast if something that we said resonated and you want to find out more and learn more. So those are the people that I'm thinking about especially. But for everyone else, we are not free until we're all free. And we are not all free. So the work continues.
That's powerful to end on. And I want to say this has been the most emotional, important, wonderful conversation that I have had in my time of doing this podcast, in terms of the amount of sheer personal anecdotes and experiences that you all have, dove into. It's really amazing that you've all been so forthcoming about it, and it's not the easiest thing to do. I know, you guys are all bold, brave, all of it, but it's never easy to give personal pieces of your life open for public consumption. I want to thank you all for being here. And just to reiterate, we will be marching on Pride. So you will see a number of photos, I'm sure, with Miss Dana leading the helm. But yes, we're very excited to keep continuing the work that we're doing from step 1 to step 100,000 million, however many it takes. Thanks everyone for listening, and thank everyone on the panel for being on today. I've had a really wonderful time. Hearts up, everyone.